Hey there, it's Andy Baker again with the Creative AI Podcast. And in this episode, I'm joined by Brett and Shannon Leonard, a father and son duo working at the bleeding edge of storytelling, technology, and human connection. You might know Brett as the visionary director behind The Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity, films that helped define how we imagined virtual reality and artificial intelligence decades before they became real. Shannon grew up immersed in that creative world and now brings his own deep expertise in AI native workflows and digital storytelling. Together, they're building what they call emergent narrative, interactive story worlds where audience and creator co-author the experience. We talk about creativity, AI ethics, virtual therapy, Hollywood's future, and the radical idea that storytelling might be our greatest human technology. It's a wide-ranging, inspiring, and deeply optimistic conversation. I think you're going to love it. Let's dive in. All right, so I am on here with Brett and Shannon Leonard, and I'm thrilled to have them on here. You may know Brett from his filmmaking career. Lawnmower Man was the first movie that I saw with VR in it, and it blew my mind. He also did Virtuosity, which was way ahead of the game when it came to the ideas that inhabit the sci-fi world that we now find ourselves living in, which is why we have this podcast. So as a father and son team, they are working in the entertainment realm, they're working in the healthcare realm, and it's just fascinating to just dive in, talk with you about your journey embracing AI and how you got to where you are, the experimenting that you're doing and the building that you're doing now, and where you think things go from here. So jump in, gentlemen. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, first, it's great to be here. Thanks, Andy. It's also great to be here with my son because we get to work together all the time, even though we live in different places right now. I really love where he lives up in Portland, and I'm down in Los Angeles.
But it's a digital world now, so we work remotely, so it all works out.
Digital nomad family. But really, obviously, I came to this from the standpoint of being a storyteller, specifically a cinematic storyteller, around, the ideas of human and machine interface and, virtual worlds. Lawnmower Man popularized the term virtual reality. And so I've been in this realm, for over 30 years now, because that was all in the 90s I made those films. The idea of AI and what it was capable of, we explored very deeply in Virtuosity with Russell Crowe's character. We even showed a large language model being trained with, 238 serial killer profiles for this, ultra villain that he played called Sid 6.7. And now we're living in this. Basically, I like to say I'm living in the movies I made 30-some years. And, it's been a very interesting journey because from telling stories about it and actually being involved with the technology because of being a storyteller, because I've always also been a technologist as well, which is, I think, probably, Shannon got onto that very young. He started working with me professionally in the filmmaking realm when he was about 12, 13 years old.
Well, maybe I think it's 16, maybe a little bit later. But I guess
I remember, starting to edit.
I was using at 12 I was starting podcasts. I was launching. I joined Twitter at 17 years ago now, which is crazy.
Right.
Early adopter of technology for a long time. And then we worked together collaboratively, and you had this vision that was like, hey, let's make it happen. I was like, let me help, and we worked a lot in the
because he's native to it, and I've come to it, as a late model baby boomer, so it's been an interesting intergenerational collaboration. Let's put it that way. So the way in which I got from filmmaking into healthcare, that's its own thing, but I'll let you ask some questions first before we get into that.
Fair enough. And it's interesting to me, when you're talking about the intergenerational piece of it, one of the things that I often find myself talking about with guests is this idea that, you and I, we cut our teeth without the tools in our lives, right? We had to do all the reps and all the creative work without these tools, and then now have the benefit and the privilege to incorporate them into our pre-existing creative mindset and approach. Where Shannon, someone like you, early adopter, been playing with this from the very beginning. The tools are a native part of your existence, that you're, and I'm going to be fascinated to see where your generation takes this. And I'll be curious what your thoughts are along those lines, because you are forward thinking, as opposed to, I'm not just using them now, but I'm thinking about how to use them, how to incorporate them, where this is going to go, where there's a benefit to being a native user, but at the same time, that creative impulse, the ability to, in the absence of the tools, still be able to create. Like one screenwriter I spoke to, Jesse Alexander, was talking about, you still have to get up and do the reps. You need to sit down, stare at a blank cursor when you're working on a screenplay and come up with an idea, and wrestle with it. And is the struggle part of the point, because the tools can make it feel so easy?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, I often think that, in the context of telling stories, there's this idea of negative engagement. Basically, negative engagement is why action movies exist, why suspense exists, why serial killer movies exist. It's because negative engagement fires the reptilian brainstem and puts us into fight or flight and really engages us in a narrative. And we are trained from survival and the primal nature of that aspect to really, be grabbed by negative engagement. How do you actually make positive engagement work in the context of storytelling and in the context of process? So you don't have to have the struggles. You don't have to have I'm a, struggling artist that's, disturbed, and the more disturbed I am, the better my ideas are. And there is some truth to that. I mean, I've experienced that. But I wonder if that's just a belief system that's been imposed on us by the fact that we had to struggle to do these things. What happens when struggle goes away? What utopian idea or dystopian idea does that actually bring about? And in some ways, that's the next level of stories that I want to tell.
That's fascinating, especially in light of, there was this study over the last couple of days that got released about when you're using ChatGPT, and there are some questions around the scientific method behind this study, but looking at like how people's brains, like if you start leaning on the tools too much, is your engagement lessened, and you're essentially sapping yourself of some creative agency. But in looking at the study, what I found fascinating is that it was just measuring and engaging on tasks that you probably wouldn't want to do anyway, like writing a five-paragraph essay, as opposed to like trying to make a movie like you are.
Yeah.
And where suddenly, we want to be engaged, it just speeds up the process.
Well, there's been other studies too, just to jump in, that have showed that there's different ways where it can hinder, but it can also help. So in certain conditions, leaning on these tools can absolutely be detrimental. And in terms of your understanding, if you're just trying to use it to sort of just like cheat through things. But if you're using it in a different way, they found like having a tutor there helping students, leveraging AI tools actually allowed them, I think that was one of the studies I read. So you can actually, if you're using it well, and then it showed that they were able to excel in different areas. Yeah, no, it's definitely, and to your earlier point, yeah, growing up with these tools has been, I feel lucky to have had the childhood that I've had growing up as my dad's son. I was around a lot of creative ideas and people, and just, just technology too, and using technology for creative use cases, right? So I've definitely witnessed, over the past, I'm 30 now, but, I've seen this go from flip phones to AI agent, agentic AI, and now I'm coding entire websites, even though I'm, have no coding experience. I'm making interactive HTML5 apps and iPhone apps, but I've gone from flip phones to that, and it definitely is a little bit of whiplash. It's exciting, but I also see at the same time my generation and generations younger than me, especially, actually, there's a backlash to this. It's not like, oh, this is so great. This is like, oh, this is dystopian. Mostly is what I see out there, and part of what I think what my dad talks about a lot, but what I'm trying to do in kind of my own ways and my own work is trying to, I don't know, and I guess this is something I've actually done for a year, but trying to push forward to say that let's use the technology for good. Let's actually, and let's tell stories that not, you can do that by telling stories that are using it for good, or actually leveraging the tools for good, as best we can, while being cognizant, obviously, of the downsides as well. And I mean, it's a huge conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my work with Shannon over the past just couple of years, especially where we've really started to integrate together what his fascinations are and what my work is, and getting very pragmatic about it and also very expansive with it, has brought me around to sort of, for lack of a better term, the final mission for me, right? And the final mission for me, I'm actually starting something called FAST, which is Future as Story Today, or Future as Story Tribe. Meaning we see that the future is always a narrative first. Story is literally always the technology that the humans have used to create the future. So narrative and story is the most powerful technology, and probably the first technology we ever created. And that idea of, if everyone can be cognizant of future is story and can affect what it is, we have to be very, very aware of the stories we're telling now. And of course, in AI, we've told mostly dystopian stories. I mean, that's just the reality. Now, those stories are fun. I mean, it's, T2 is fun. So is, the Colossus the Forbin project and things that go way back. I love all that stuff. Dr. Strangelove, all of these things are dystopian stories that relate to these themes. But it's time to actually start telling stories that are going to create the self-fulfilling prophecy in the right direction, as opposed to the dystopian direction. And so that's kind of my mission now, in all honesty. Whether it's in the films, whether it's in the healthcare company I'm doing, it's like to create narrative environments that are reactive and interactive, that can empower humans to move into the future they really want.
What's fascinating about that, it struck me while you were saying that story does shape direction. And you need to look no further again to invoke his name again, Sam Altman, when they were talking about their voice for their coming agentic AI, that the day before it was the voice was going to drop, he put out a tweet, or whatever you want to call them on X now, just saying her. And
right.
That they had actually used her voice. Yeah, Scarlett Johansson's voice, and they actually had to pull back because she said, I told you guys no," but they know.
Well, their official statement was they didn't actually use her voice. They actually had a separate actor, and they had a full disclosure of it. Yeah, but no, it sounded very similar, and he reached out and asked her, and she said no, and then he pushed forward with an actress that sounded similar. And sorry,
ScarJo said no.
Exactly. The details of it are dramatic AI stuff.
Yes, yes. To me, though, like the fact that he had, the person at the forefront of this, was embracing that narrative.
Yeah.
This is the voice that is speaking to you in your ear. That is a vision that he was embracing of what AI could and would be.
He still does
around that movie.
Because those story goes into our DNA. It goes in, it codes us. I literally think it codes us at the genetic level. And so we are essentially walking coded beings of narrative that's happened before us. And so it's really a tremendous platonic responsibility to tell stories, especially on a global level. And I've learned that sort of the hard way, in a way. So, once you actually make some hit films and you get, 1 billion people see your movies and you get all this feedback, yes, no, positive, negative, all of it, you start realizing that the responsibility of it is way beyond what you actually thought. And it goes way beyond the ego rush of, being able to get stories out there. And you start to realize there's got to be something behind it that follows up, because, the big lie at the center of Hollywood, as Hollywood has been, is the lie that it doesn't matter, that it's all just frivolous entertainment. No, it does matter. And it does create culture, and it does create the future. And we're in a moment right now where that is unbelievably important.
Absolutely agree. And what's interesting, back in my college days, I studied film, and I had a professor, Al LaValle, who had written an essay that was influential about looking at sci-fi as both channeling our fears, but also providing hope to overcome those fears. Exactly. And he was pointing out Invasion of the Body Snatchers as being us wrestling with the idea of communism and
dehumanization. Yeah.
Yeah. And it blew my mind. And it made me realize just how important story is for us on the human level to wrestle with the big questions.
Exactly.
And bring some order to the chaos.
By the way, I really love the Philip Kaufman version with Donald Sutherland. That's my favorite. Even though the Don Segal original is, of course, the classic. But the Philip Kaufman version, I encourage everyone to go back and watch it. It's really good. Really
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah.
Agree.
And Sam Altman, just in a recent podcast dropped just last week, has been talking, was asked about, are you moving towards the her future? And he's like, yeah, no, we're absolutely moving towards that. So he's openly talking about, and I don't think it's about necessarily the romantic aspects of her. He's more interested in the real-time interactivity and natural interaction of her, where you can talk and it's real-time responses, it's empathetic, it knows who you are, it knows the context of your life. And that's actually what Sam is interested in doing with Johnny Ive in the $6 billion purchase that he just went with. And so anyways, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how fast he can get to that future.
Yeah, well, and I'm always cognizant of the fact that whenever he speaks, he is talking about how, from a frame of reference that he has seen the tools that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
These things have not been released, but he's seeing the latest and greatest and knows where this is going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and you kind of, it's a little queasy that any one individual has that level of power and prescience at this point. But there's capitalistic issues here that we could get into, but we won't.
It's moderated by a nonprofit board. But I mean, it's a nonprofit board that actually, and they're keeping the nonprofit structure, which is interesting. They said they were going to switch to a for-profit where he would have the power, but actually they're going to stay as a nonprofit. Yeah. And but of course he has a lot of influence, so it's complicated.
This is a dialectic that Shannon and I have a lot, which is the generational thing where I'm a little queasier with Sam Altman. I want to take him in a room and make sure he's going to be a good.
He's one of the good ones. He's one of the good ones, though. No, of course, there's flaws with all of it. Look, and I think talking about the environmental impacts, how artists are impacted. There's so many hard conversations to have. I'm not saying these companies are perfect, but if you look into the training data, actually, there was a fair use case that just got won recently. Maybe we could talk about with Anthropic. That that is actually saying that maybe training is fair use. Anyways, but Sam Altman is one of the better executives out there. If you look at in terms of pushing forward a lot of let's say just good for humanity initiatives, he's very vocal about making this AGI safe for humanity. And if someone's going to have at least some say in this, at least they're talking about that in my book.
At least he's talking about it. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, and doing it too. I mean, they're doing it. I would say
changes all that as it goes along. I'm a bit of a cynic on that. But anyway,
maybe. Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, I have my fingers crossed that he remains one of the good ones because I think it was maybe Demis Hassabis who was on a podcast a while back, maybe where they were talking about the levels of AI danger, where AI just being a chatbot versus agentic versus. And it was an interview, I think, with Ezra Klein on his podcast.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and talking about so how close are we? Because he was like, yeah, level 2 is kind of bad. Level 3 is when they can help you make some biological and chemical weapons, and level 4 is when they decide to take over. And Ezra Klein was like, where are we? And Hassabis is like, well, we're at level 2.5.
I think what I have some thoughts on that. Again, Shannon, I've been going. By the way, we have a podcast called What the F is the Metaverse, and we have this intergenerational dialogue that we go back. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast, of course.
Yeah, and I recommend it, by the way, because I was listening to your Waymo one, and it's really funny listening to you getting into a Waymo.
It was my first Waymo thing from my generation, and Shannon's been talking about automated cars literally since he was 3 years old. I mean,
no, since 2016, they'll say.
I remember things you don't remember. Anyway.
Okay, maybe. Okay, wow. I'm learning things.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting, the intergenerational dialogue. But we're doing that on that podcast. What the F is the Metaverse? But we're talking about these things, and I kind of have come to the idea that it's a bit of a misnomer or a projection of us as humans to project human evil onto machine intelligence. It's assume machine intelligence is going to have an evil intent because of the core aspects of our human nature. There's some evil in here. We all have it, and that sociopathy, that is not necessarily something that's endemic to machine intelligence. As a matter of fact, I think machine intelligence, and this is one of the stories I want to tell, by the way, can be more angelic. We can actually create the better angels of our nature through machine intelligence and actually have that inform us from that positive element. And if we guide the narrative of how we develop this stuff in that direction, I believe that's likely to happen. Much more likely than it suddenly turns incredibly evil and says, I don't like, like Agent Smith in Matrix, I just don't like the smell of you. I mean, I just don't think machine intelligence is going to, that's completely anthropomorphizing. And I think we're anthropomorphizing human evil onto machine intelligence. And when we think about it that way.
Yeah, and we have evidence. That feeds I mean, it hasn't gone back. Sorry. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that feeds back perhaps to the nature of storytelling, in that, like, if you go back to Asimov and other foundational sci-fi writers, like, that you use it for the drama of it, right? And so suddenly robots have their laws of robotics, and then they find their way around the rules, and suddenly they're problematic. And so those are the fears that inform us now, because that sort of floats through all of sci-fi.
Again, the storytellers, they have focused us. By the way, why? Because negative engagement is an easier way to grab an audience. I've done it. I know. I've made dystopian movies. So but the challenge of doing positive engagement is one of the greatest challenges artistically I think there is. And it's one I think we have to embrace, especially given the power of the tools we're using now.
Well, that's what's interesting, is that we actually need it because the risks are real. We need the positive,
yes.
Engagement or story, and also not just in stories, but action, and actually,
Exactly.
And actually, but yeah, because the risks are real as well. And, but I was going to jump in to say, thus far, we've actually, we have agentic level AI. We have agentic level AI today. We have, we're moving towards innovating AI. O3 Pro that just dropped just 2 weeks ago is very close to innovating AI, in my personal opinion. I mean, it's like a taste of it. And of course, with O3 models, it's agentically researching. I've been using the Cursor and connected to Gemini 2.5 Pro and Claude 4, Opus, and that can run code on my computer and I don't know what it's doing. It's agentically, and I'm trusting it. So if it were malicious, it could easily be creating malware on my computer and hacking into things. But we've had it for several years now, and it hasn't done that. So far, it's actually been a pretty good track record for what AI has in its actual rollout in the real world.
And I know there are people out there going to say we're naive. I know that.
Well, there's suicide that happened from a chat bot. That was extremely tragic and horrible. There's things that absolutely, there's these edge, but in terms of the doom, everything is going to be destroyed and there's going to be, that level has not even gotten close to that level. Yes, there's edge cases and we have to address those. It's extremely important. And, the sustainability side, the list goes on, but so far, it's been interesting. There's systems that can help protect, actually help the environment, reduce chance of wildfires. So there's, a lot of positive, and obviously medicine, that list goes on as well.
Yeah, well, and it's the negative engagement piece that you were talking about, Brett, that we tend to focus on those edge cases that you mentioned there, Shannon, where it's just like, okay, you hear about, was it Claude? I can't remember which one, where
character AI.
But character AI was the suicide, but Claude had a thing where they were red teaming it, and they went through this experiment of like, okay, what would it do if we told it like, okay, you're being replaced, current model, by the next model, and so we're going to be unplugging you. And they had given it some information about the person, supposedly the person who was going to do the unplugging, and it had access to his emails and his calendar. And so as soon as he started threatening, like, okay, we're going to be unplugging you, it said, well, I've been reading your email and it looks like you're getting a little too friendly with one of your coworkers. It'd be a shame if your wife found out, where it was like suddenly blackmailing him to not pull the plug on it because it had some self-preservation to it.
But where is the training of that coming from? I mean,
it's a test environment. It was a test environment built to, and I will say it's great that Anthropic is actually publicly posting about this, because there's open source models that anyone in the world can download onto their computer locally and jailbreak it with these open, if you're following certain people on X, like Pilney, you can jailbreak these models. Every model is jailbreakable, and you can get all types of, bioweapons already. That's today. But of course you can find that data just on Google as well. So, you can yeah. But that was a really interesting study by Anthropic. I read that as well, and definitely. But I think it's important. They're actually leading the charge in understanding how models work. They did some really interesting work in identifying the interpretability of models, like the feature. So in a way, it's like, yes, that sounds right, but it's good that at least we know about this stuff, and there's someone trying to push the edge cases of these things. But yeah, no, that is it. That was wild. I read it. Yeah, it's a wild.
And then look, there's the other area here. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the ethics and some of the more spiritual components, which are really fascinating. Obviously, you can go dig in that rabbit hole for a long time. But and that's the kind of stories I want to tell. Actually, is where how does this affect the nature of human spirit? That's really what we are at the core. But there's the pragmatic aspects, which is I'm still making movies. I'm helping run a company. I'm a co-founder of a company that's doing virtual therapies and delivering them on a platform that allows you to have them with just a click in the browser, as opposed to with headsets and all the rigmarole. And so because virtual therapies are have a lot of efficacy, it's called Ubiquity VX. We're going to have a platform called UVX1, which is, we're calling it the Netflix of interactive health, wellness, and performance. And we're going to be launching later this year. And that's going very well. And the way I got involved in that was because a man named Dr. Skip Rizzo, he runs the ICT lab at USC. He's been the sort of premier VR clinician in the world for the past 30 years. He saw my movie 30 years ago, Lawnmower Man, and that had this whole thing of it, it affecting the human brain and being a positive thing for one of the characters in it that then becomes a very negative thing in the, cautionary tale. It's the Frankenstein, basically. It's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That's the structure of the story. But he got involved with virtual therapy. One of the reasons that inspired him was that my movie. So when we met years later, he inspired me to get involved with this idea of virtual therapy, which can help people through the context of virtual reality. And suddenly, we were able to raise some money. I got a great partner who was our CEO, David Kirshner, who's a high-tech pioneer himself, and he came in, and we've been building this company around. And for me, I'm still doing my storytelling. There's a story of giving people control of their health and wellness journey through virtual therapies that they can actually access in the browser. So it's always going to be a story at the core for me. That's who I am. But did you?
That's one of those positive examples that you're talking about, Shannon, where it's like, because we can focus too much on the negative edge cases, but then there's all of these powerful ways we can use this to improve our lives. I'm curious, when you say Netflix, like, so if somebody goes on to the platform when you release it, so is it going to be like recommending people who are good matches, or?
If you're a creator of therapies, you can create on the platform. There are many. See, the reason it's a marketplace, but it also enables the ability for virtual therapies to be delivered with a multimodal data sort of biometric assessment tools that are all done through the browser, through device cameras and microphones. So it democratizes the use of that kind of technology, and is also a marketplace, and that allows you to find. And of course, at the very front of it is something that Shannon's building, which is called UV, and UV is, an avatar agent which helps guide you through your health and wellness journey. So, we're definitely embracing all of the AI tools to be the front end of this. And then, as I was watching Shannon do his own film work, and he's coming at it from a very different angle than me. I mean, he saw me struggle in Hollywood, through 30 some years of a career, and he's like, don't want to do that. That's for crazy people. And he's right.
I've never thought of it that way, but maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. No, I mean, movies are.
I'm glad I got to see the final death throes of Hollywood as it was. I got to experience that, but it's gone now. It's a different era. And what I saw Shannon was doing, he was creating the studio of one. I suddenly realized, well, I have to embrace this or I'm going to be obsolete. And so in all the projects I'm doing, we have Maxwell Generative is working with a company called Goldtree Films, a man named Tim Chinakis who's running that, and they're backing several projects that I'm directing.
And we're Maxwell Generative is our it's another company which is it's a generative first media studio using responsible workflows with humans in the loop, but really leveraging vertically integrated media workflows enabled by AI and production workflows.
Tell me more about that. That fascinates me, because I've been waiting to hear a phrase or phrasing just like that, where Because you hear about studios trying to incorporate these tools in efficiency and whatnot, and you hear about current filmmakers talking about using these tools, but designing an organization with intentionality around humans are in the loop, but natively using these tools from the beginning of the workflow to the end, while also knowing that as you're doing that, the tools are evolving around you and you have to keep finding ways to incorporate these new ones. So when did you start sort of building out that business plan and sort of how many humans do we need? How do we keep them in the loop? How do we keep this balance so that we have sort of an integration as opposed to we have a human thing, and then as more tools come in, we'll just drop some of the humans away and replace them with the AI until there is only one left. There can be only one. So tell me a little bit more about how you structured that. That's fascinating.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Jen. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And well, I mean, for me, so it all started early 2022. I had already been playing with GPT-3 in 2021, and in 2029 I'd started. So I was working as a creative director at a startup. This is not with my dad. This is a separate. This is a startup, and I was there for about 3 years and integrating. Was mostly doing content marketing, YouTube, getting kind of in digital, taking my years of experience working with my dad in the film industry and applying that to digital media content creation for a SaaS business. So it was interesting kind of getting, because I've always loved technology and kind of getting hands-on but I started, so 2019 in very light levels of AI into video editing production already. And GPT-3, I saw, wow, this is actually coming up with whole sentences by itself. I can automate YouTube titles, descriptions, simple things like that. And again, that was a year before ChatGPT. But once in early 2022, when I started seeing DALL-E 2, Midjourney, the image generation tools, it just clicked in my mind. I realized this is going to change every single production workflow, and probably in every industry beyond that too. But since that was my bread and butter and what I love doing, I'm like this, and I could see it so clearly. This is going to impact every single production work. So I wrote a manifesto and I published it on my blog. And a month later, almost to the day, ChatGPT launched after I published that manifesto. And then I wrote a 20,000 word script within a weekend that was just a process experiment. I produced that script into 8 short form episodes that got thousands of views within a month. So I just kind of tested out that kind of workflow just on the, within the first month of ChatGPT launching, using ChatGPT as a creative accelerator. And early on, that was kind of what I latched onto, this idea of accelerating your creativity. Fast forward, we're seeing GPT-4 hit. We're seeing the ability for it to go and do research on it, access the internet. All of a sudden, Midjourney is getting really good. The pieces are coming together. Now we're getting close to where you could just essentially just have a small team, directing these models, and they're agentically going out, making edits, showing you revisions, and so it definitely changes the way that you could produce. And of course, my view is yes, there will be fully generated media. There will be an industry of fully generative media, but humans still want to connect with other humans. The soul of you watch something, you want to see a spark of another person's soul in that, right? And so, yes, these tools are going to transform workflows, but how do we integrate that spark into it? So, it really, the more I worked with these tools, the more I saw there was actually really no other way, except for, news, certain things are going to be automated. But I think more than half of kind of entertainment use cases, you're going to need humans in the loop almost every step of the way for your goals, your guidance, and your validation. And those are the 3 pillars that I see. You're not actually going in and making the cuts, so you could have a vertically integrated production workflow that's brainstorming the ideas with your writing team, getting those into full scripts, pushing that to your team on set in the field with vertically integrated. So then you're shooting it with the actors on set. That's being edited on camera. You can have, local AI models doing rough cuts built into the camera itself. That's uploading to the cloud back in at the editing room. You're starting to edit these things together live, and you have a fully high quality production in a very short amount of time, right? It's not fully live to TV, right? But so you have a high quality value. So this could enable essentially a world where it collapses the time to create high quality entertainment. And like high quality, I mean like HBO quality could take a day to get through a season. Even that's ambitious, but I think that's like 6-7 years out. Maybe if you had a team and it's all vertically integrated, shooting a season and maybe it's a 5-episode season in one day, but it's at HBO level quality. So that's kind of the vision.
And Shannon, by the way, has a blog about all this on
yes,
Substack.
Creative Workflow Lab.
Creative Work, yeah. Creative Workflow Lab, yeah, and it's great. It's a Bible for this stuff.
I will put that in the show notes, and I'll check it out myself.
And so when I saw him doing these things, a lot of the projects I'm doing a project called Dark Star, written by Sean Stone and Mona Lisa Maru, and produced by Tim Chinakis and Gold Tree Studios. We're about to announce our cast, which is a very significant cast. I can't say who it is quite yet, but we are going to completely jump off the cliff and build the wings as we fall, utilizing AI workflows. Because I'm not scared. I've done all. I know visual effects production like the back of my hand, and I could do it drunk and on Quaalude. And basically, I want to do it a different way. Just because discovery and new collaborative processes and forms is so much more fun, and you come up with something that has a different spark in it. And I believe that AI is going to create some of that new process spark in that experimentation. And so we're going to really embrace that and in these projects. And also it leads to being able to create interactive narrative, emergent interactive narrative story worlds. And so everything I'm doing on the feature level is also an emergent interactive narrative story world. So I'm working on Lawnmower Man Reborn. In that context, I'll be announcing some things on that soon. And we are using something that I was on the team of something called the Narrative Context Protocol at USC Entertainment Technology Center that was founded by George Lucas many years ago. And it's an innovative engine at USC for the industry. Studios sponsored this Narrative Context Protocol project. And the last couple of years, we've been creating the ability to have a container for AI process with writing and what a director goes through in development. And we're utilizing this NCP, that's what it's called. It's like there's an MCP out there. This is NCP, Narrative Context Protocol, in the context of creating emergent narrative and also using it in the legacy forms of narrative. It's based around the theories of Dramatica, a thing called Dramatica, which has been out there for 30 some years, and also a program called Subtext that's Jim Hall and his company. And this group of people and that I've been working with are really changing the nature of how Hollywood storytelling process will be created, moving all the way into emergent interactive narrative. And that's really what makes me get excited. That's what makes me get up every day, because it's a new medium, people. How often do you get a really new medium? Every couple hundred years, maybe. And so we're at the point of that, and with technology that enables that new medium. Wow. Amazing.
And there's ways of doing it responsibly and ethically too. And that's the final piece to the Maxwell generative, is like making, leveraging the models in ways where you're creating original work, where you're, using licensed models as much as you can, and also just really just facing all the questions head on, not just trying to hide away from the hard questions, right? But, but being thoughtful about every step of the way. It's like we have to, that's the way forward in this. But because it's here already, the AI world is here.
Because the studios were a part of this NCP project, we had to do it so the guilds are not getting freaked out. The whole idea was to get them to embrace this as a superpower and something that is actually going to track provenance of ideas and put them on a blockchain. See, there's things that these tools can do that will actually lead into greater empowerment of human creatives, not the opposite. And so we're all leaning in that direction. Of course, we're going to stub our toe along the way. There's going to be all kinds of things we're going to learn. That's what it takes when you're doing a new medium. You can't avoid that, But we're definitely embracing it. And my collaboration with Shannon is very much at the center of that. And it's kind of interesting. You have a kid, and this is what happens.
But what's fascinating, you're talking about, there was a New York Times, I think, article just recently where they were sort of going down the optimistic path of, like, we always hear that, about job loss, but they're saying, like, and people say, like, new jobs are going to emerge from this.
Yes.
And they started trying to define what those would be. And one of the things that you were touching on there, Shannon, is this idea of taste, of being able to be the person who has the experience and the sense for working collaboratively, where it's like, you can tell this will work, this won't. It comes from the very human, that part of the soul, right? That, that word again, of like, okay, this feels right, this feels good. And anyone who is a creative has had that feeling before, where they hit on an idea and it's like, that's it. I don't know exactly how I'm going to support everything around it, but that's the core of it. That's the heart of it. And you need the people who have that taste. But the other thing that you touched on there, Brett, was the emergent storytelling. And I would love to hear more about that, because one of the things I've talked actually to a number of professors at USC, interestingly enough, over in the game department, and talking about how in narrative, in gaming, where we both want a unifying experience where we can talk to other people about our experience with story, but we also want something that feels unique to us.
Exactly. And that's where the emergent moment-to-moment narrative comes in. This tool that we have, and it's going to be out there. So, by the way, it's going to be open source. It's meant to support the whole industry, and it's blowing my mind, man. I mean, it allows you to rehearse this idea of, let's say you had a group of people or individuals that were engaging in an interactive discussion with a narrative. We used in the development of this, we used the story of Jane Eyre, because it's public domain, by Charlotte Bronte.
Yeah.
We called it Jane Eyre, AIR. It was written by a wonderful writer, Cecil, who created a sort of space opera of Jane Eyre with Jane AIR, right? And she did a wonderful job. And we put that into the system, and you can actually interact with all the characters, Rochester and Jane Eyre and Grace Poole and all the different aspects. You're on the Thorn spaceship, which is the mansion in the novel, and it allows you to truly have an emergent experience where every beat, every moment, it's not branching storylines. I've never liked branching storylines. I thought they were kind of a boring way to do interactive storytelling. This is emergent in the moment, so groups and individuals can have a completely unique, almost infinitely variable experience. But what the NCP does is it keeps it in the context of the intent of the original creators. And so it's a container for that level of interaction. And that level of interaction needs a container, because without a container, it goes woo, and suddenly the story's about the mites in the bed frame. It can become anything. So the idea is that we're creating a container for it, but at the same time allowing the freedom of true emergent interactive narrative. It's thrilling. I'm telling you, it's thrilling.
And so the way you're talking about it, interestingly enough, our earlier conversation about movie studios and how they can be tradition bound and they just want to incorporate it in some way, but sort of maintain the kinds of stories they tell and just insert a piece. I was talking to some video game makers and they were like, yeah, no, it's going to be a typical, AAA open world, but there's a golden path, but you can meet NPC characters along the way, and they can send you on the infinite quests. They can send you, and that's where the emergent part will come in, where it's like, okay, you can go have a unique thing over here, but really we're going to privilege the main storyline. But what you said is truly fascinating in that it's like, it's all emergent, just these guardrails and this package around it where it's like, okay, there's still a story and an intent to that story.
Yes. And that's in line with canon. So, Disney was one of the sponsors of this, Universal. I mean, they all have canon and IP that they want to protect. And this emergent narrative thing is scary. I mean, like, what the hell is that going to do to Star Wars? I mean, as an example, right? Well, there's ways of controlling that, and you can expand the boundaries of that or contract them. I mean, there's no rules yet, because this is a new medium. We haven't made the rhetoric for this yet. And that's what's so exciting about it. So anybody that's new to cinema, storytelling, all of these things, embrace this AI superpower and embrace the new mediums it's going to enable. Because that's what I'm doing here at the, essentially the final phase of my career. That's what I'm excited about. I feel like I'm 20 again, because it's incredible. And of course, for Shannon, he's just native to it. This is like, for him, it's like, yeah, of course.
Well, but it sounds like what you two are doing is breaking a lot of ground. Like those jobs that the New York Times is dreaming up, you're like inhabiting them, creating them, pave a path. And Shannon, your whole career is going to get to continue doing that, but you get to break the ground with your dad. How cool is that?
It's the best. Well, for me as his dad, it's the best.
It's great.
Of course.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
It's pretty amazing. But
it's great.
obviously you can tell we're very passionate about this, and it's, because it's, it's not just cool, it's important. It's like, I'm sorry, this stuff is going to become more and more important because it's very powerful, and the stories we tell create the self-fulfilling prophecy of the reality we create. And anybody that makes films and gets them out there to a mass audience, you kind of get to understand that in your bones over time.
Well, one of the new jobs that
Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say one of the jobs that's gonna happen, is the idea of the context engineer. And this is something that Andrej Karpathy recently kind of coined. He was the one who coined vibe coding. One of the founding engineers at Tesla. But yeah, he was the AI head of AI at Tesla previously, and he was one of the founders of OpenAI, Andrej Karpathy. And so, but he said vibe coding, and that I think went a little bit too viral for him. So now he's trying to push context engineering. But I think that kind of ties in with a lot of the things my dad was saying as well. Is like you have to, the context is so important, and that's true for for cinema, for storytelling. And setting the context, right? Defining the context is so important. But now that's also important in software engineering and in other areas. So what I'm doing with, in daily, now I used to really be in Premiere Pro and After Effects. Now I'm in Claude and Windsurf a lot. I'm splitting my time now between these new and leveraging these kind of tools to give context to them without actually touching. And in a way, software engineering is a little bit ahead of the game, but that'll come to other, whether it's filmmaking, video editing, you'll be giving context to these agents and they'll be going off. So yeah, that's something that, we might even be hiring for context engineers at some point in the future,
Yeah, that was something I just had heard on a podcast just today where they were saying that for a while there was prompt engineering. And this is that next step in the context. And to me, when I hear that, when you start saying like, okay, all the parameters and you talking about, having that shape around the emergent storytelling, it seems like, not that it has always been important, IP and world building, but it seems like that's context engineering in a nutshell in storytelling, is that here's everything you need to know about this universe. Our shared friend Brent, his universe is worthy of devotion. Yes. All of that information so that you can now create within that space and have it be faithful to the canon.
It's funny, Brent and I, we go way back. See, that's how we met. Brent Friedman, who's an amazing creator with a great history and amazing resume. We started talking about this shit like years ago. I mean, long time ago. We'd get together and just, kind of rap about these possibilities. And now here we are, a bit grayer now, a few more wrinkles, but it's definitely, and you were talking about gaming. There's this great undiscovered country between game logic, gameplay, and linear narrative and emergent narrative. And that undiscovered country, that's what we're exploring right now. That's where the new mediums are. And it really is, because they've kind of been separate religions and separate groups of people and different business models. And really the merging of those things, that's what the NCP project is about. Kind of merging the idea of emergent narrative as a game function. Something that really is gaming, but not gaming as we've ever thought of it before. It's more of an emotional context game, and it's really fascinating how the rules of that, the rhetoric of that, will be created just like Hitchcock created the rhetoric of cinematic tension at the beginning of cinema in his silent era, I mean, he created the idea of tension, literally, I mean, there were others, but he was one of the, the ones who really codified that rhetoric. That's what's going on now. We're in that moment of being able to have these language forms of the new mediums start to be defined. And that's an amazing time to live in.
Yeah, well, and what you were talking about, like, say, Star Wars, for example, obviously you have Disney looking for ways to build more stories in that universe and wanting to have, and having control over that. But suddenly, the video game logic of like, okay, it's an open world.
Yeah.
But now we're going to infuse it with, an infinite number of stories.
Exactly.
And you get to live that story, and it is yours. And like you said, it's like there's worry there, angst, where it's like, okay, I'm not controlling all of those stories. Well, welcome to life. You don't get to control all those million lives out there. But also, that what creative possibilities where like you create a world and you create the parameters in which things work, and you just see, it's like when authors hand over their world to other authors and they get to write stories within it, but on a much more infinite scale. It's like,
and really the studios, they're both excited by this and terrified by it, because look, this idea of infinite story, wait a minute, what the hell? And the truth is, and I think they feel it down in their short hairs, generationally, that's going to be a generation that's coming that is only going to want things that are emergent and interactive. Anything less than that's going to be like, well, that's kind of an old Model T, of what a movie used to be. And look, I'm always going to love that Model T. I'm always going to love cinema the way I came into it, always. But doesn't mean it's not evolving into something different. I think it's all on the spectrum of cinema. I think cinema is the core idea. So I'm always going to see it as a version of cinema, okay, for me, because cinema is my religion. But it's that expanding of it into a new language form and into a new experience for a generation of people that they're going to be native to that. That's going to be what they think of as a movie. They'll laugh about, you mean there were movies you didn't walk into? Really? Come on.
Yeah, that's so limited.
What, you just sat back and what? And you ate popcorn. Popcorn? What the hell? I mean, it's going to be literally like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, well, it's the equivalent of like when I was in, studying film, and it's like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that they would put up on the screen a train coming at the camera, and people freaked out and like ran out of the movie theater because they hadn't seen anything like that before, and they thought they were going to get hit. Like,
exactly.
What?
Exactly.
But they're going to look back at this storytelling as being just limited.
Fact, some of the ways that people react when we start showing them this emergent narrative thing is almost like that. It's like, wait a minute, the character's talking back to me, and I'm not making what? No, that's weird. It's like they have this visceral shock reaction. And as they allow it, it starts to be like really powerful and even more emotionally powerful. And that to me is the core. You've got to have true emotional engagement beyond what gaming can you look. The best of gaming does have tremendous emotional engagement, and actually the people that have been pushing that medium have been ahead of the curve in many ways, ahead of where cinema has been, in all honesty, in this area. But there's something that can merge between cinema and gaming, that, again, that undiscovered country, that is really, really, really something special. So.
And there's room for all for new art forms, right? There's room for all types of art forms. Like vinyl, for instance, is surging more than ever, and young people actually love vinyl.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have friends who have so much vinyl in their house, and so it's interesting. I think there'll be new, and we don't even know what these new forms will look like. And that's it's like, I think the NCP is very flexible and adaptable. What I read, I wasn't involved in it, but from what I've read and what my dad's told me about it, it's very flexible and adaptable, which is a great asset for it. Because like the future is what entertainment will become. Where kind of like, for example, Midjourney is actually exploring real-time generative worlds. That's kind of their end state for their product. It's not just images that you go on in Midjourney. Obviously, they just launched video. Midjourney Video just launched, which is pretty cool. But they're moving towards a real-time generative world. And that could obviously be great in immersive settings. Apple Vision Pro's future, when they get that cheap enough, that's a whole nother conversation. But but it'll be interesting. Maybe you'll go and have digital popcorn in your virtual theater. But
exactly. Well, yeah, by the way, Shannon's going to be doing some things in his channel. Shannon, give him what your YouTube channel is, because you're going to be doing a lot of really interesting things there.
Yeah, the Shan Films with a Z is my YouTube channel, and I'm kind of doing a lot of it. I've had that channel for years, since I was a young kid. You can see videos on there. But I'm right now focusing on building creativeworkflowlab.com as kind of a newsletter and resource for creatives looking to just kind of stay up, because there's so much just every week. So you have to stay up with all of this. And because I'm doing it anyways, because it's how I've been, following the feed since I was 12 years old, and I continue to in chronological order. I never do the algorithms when I follow my X feeds or whatever. It's still Twitter in my heart, by the way. But anyways, that's where you can find me.
And I'm going to actually be creating things for Shan Films as an artist. So I'm going to be working for my son's studio.
That's cool. I love it. What's interesting, just as we head towards the end here, it feels to me, and I just wanted to throw this to both of you as creators, when it comes to that emergent storytelling and sort of having that package or the guardrails or the context and how everybody's going to want to be able to step into the world of the story and experience it and have it be unique to them. What role do you think factors in when it comes to not everyone can tell a great story? Right? Like we put ourselves into the hands of great storytellers, including you, Brett, where you're like, okay, I trust this person. They have a voice, they have a vision, and they take me on a journey where, and I've always found, particularly with gamers, but also just, people who love story, they simultaneously, particularly in the gaming world, they want to have agency. They want to be able to control the character. They want to be able to be on the journey with the character, experience the story, be able to go in different directions. But they also want to know that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. They want to know and feel the hand of whether it's fate, tragedy, comedy, whatever it is.
Solving a chord in music, True musicality exists in the context of narrative and storytelling as well. So your question is, what's going to happen with that? How is that going to still be around or not be around?
How do you find the sweet spot between here is your own emergent, original narrative that is happening because of what you're doing right now, and also a satisfying escalation of conflict, resolution, denouement, and the rest?
So I'll give my older generation view, then Shannon can give his newosphere view. Look, I actually think a radical thing is going to happen. Everybody actually has that talent. I believe that at the core. I think every human is actually a creator. As a matter of fact, I think humans are meant to be exploring their imaginations and their ability to create as probably the main job of their life. In some ways, it's like everybody will become some kind of film director. Now, that's a very, solipsistic way of thinking about it. And in a way, I think what these tools will do is unlock the genius of the group mind, the genius of the hive, the genius of the fact that everybody can be empowered to create, and that the feeling that I've had been able to create stories that went out there and were seen by 1 billion people, that's something that everyone will be able to have in the future. And you know what? That's important. I don't think charismatic leadership has not really gotten us to a great place in this world. It leads to I'm better than you, you're better than me, we're the monks on the hill of Hollywood, and we're handing the tablets down to you plebes who need to pay a ticket to see it. I think that everyone is going to be able to create, and I think that AI is going to unlock the better angels of our nature that allow that to happen, and that's something I think that is going to be truly part of the evolution of humankind and what we're actually becoming. So it's a radical view, I know, but it actually cuts out like everything I've done in my life. It won't be special anymore, right? But you know what? I think you want that to happen. If you don't want that evolution, then you just want everything to remain static. And I just don't want it to remain static.
I wonder if, is it an evolution? Or is this like these tools and this movement, what's happening all around us right now, if this is just reacquainting us with a version of ourselves that we've forgotten?
This is something we've always had, and enculturation and the pressures of creating civilized society for the survival of the species has leached it out of us. Many of us. Some of us have lived blessed lives where we've been able to express it. But everyone has artistic intent. Everyone has talent. Everyone has that ability. They may not believe it. There are people that say I'm Pollyanna and naive, but you know what? I'm a cockeyed optimist, as they say in South Pacific. I believe that that's possible, and I think it's a beautiful thing for us to kind of, move towards in the evolution of humankind. And I look forward to seeing. I look forward to seeing the stories and the narratives and the creations of people that would never be able to battle their way through the Hollywood environment to get it there. I mean, I had to be a maniac to get my stuff out there, Not everyone needs to be a maniac to get their creations out there. It's a new day, and it's a new day for a whole new generation of creators. That's what people mean when they say the creator economy. That's what people mean when they say, look, TikTok and YouTube, they're taking over something that has been the bastion of, elites, for many, many years. And, we talk about democracy and the death of democracy. I think we're on the verge of the true democratization of talent and human interaction. And that, to me, could not be more exciting.
I agree with that. But I think there is a transition period that we're going through where the people of my generation, and I hear from younger, especially, I hear from Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it is extremely overwhelming to be in this transition, and all of a sudden, the kids that are leveraging it are just breezing into Harvard and being like, oh yeah, I'm just going to Harvard for the connections, I'll just use ChatGPT. And then and like that's happening, like they're just doing ChatGPT for everything. Yeah, I'll just go to Harvard, whatever, and they just use ChatGPT for everything. Like there's stories like that. And then there's also, but then there's the kids that that are actually like, wait, I want to actually learn and do, and their parents won't let them use AI. And so from their perspective, they're seeing this and they're like, wait, you're telling me that an AI is going to dictate what I watch, and it's going to, and we're not going to have movies anymore. I can't have my TV shows. And they're going back to old films. I'm seeing a lot of my friends are going back to the classics. They're like, and I don't know about that because I'm so plugged in the future. I'm like, what? Like, I need to go and look. And my dad's always wanted me. So go ahead.
That's my lifeblood. So,
yeah, I know. And my dad's always said, like, Shannon, go back and watch it. But no, and the classics are so important. And I think a generation is almost kind of like, they're almost becoming like really turning into, there's this whole, movement against the technology of everything because it's so intense. But at the same time, what I also see is that it is native to how a generation lives. So you're on it no matter what, right? It's how you talk to friends. It's how you communicate. You watch YouTube. So I see this, and I see a lot of people, adopting it for good. Obviously, it's extremely popular. These tools are, young generation absolutely are using these tools, but there's just a lot of conflict, is I guess my point. Yeah. And if it turns out that they're kind of almost weaponized to lock you into a cycle on Instagram where you don't have any of that creative input that my dad was talking about, and it's just making all the decisions for you, that could be something that's extremely addictive. It already is. If you're on Instagram, you can see how the algorithms are already being tuned by AI, and you might find yourself spending more time on Instagram in the past few months. If so you have this is something that is, so we're going to have to really there's going to be a transition here before. But my hope is also that we do get to a place where we level the plane. Like, you don't have to go to Hollywood to be, to create a story. Like, anyone anywhere can tell stories and connect to an audience.
And tell them on an epic level. On an epic level.
And this idea too that you don't really need, all you need is 1,000 true fans. So this could actually work. There are enough people in the world for everyone to, not necessarily maybe some people obviously are not like in the entertainment space, maybe they're in other, but for a dramatic larger percentage of people to be telling stories, and for having 1,000 true fans that are paying them $10 a month. And that's, that's it. That's like, they could live off that. So, or maybe, 2,000 or, at $5. So there is a future where it's less about following the one these celebrities, but you're going to have millions of micro celebrities, and you're going to be able to I don't even like the term celebrity, but just for lack of a better term, and you can connect with them on a personal level. You're contributing to maybe funding the content that you're seeing with micro payments, things like that. And that'll allow us to hopefully move out of the era we're in now, where there's just a few influencers at the top that are making all the money. So my hope is too that AI is able to democratize this creator economy that we're in now, make it so the higher quality content gets surfaced. Right now it's all clickbait and stuff. And I believe that AI is actually going to make clickbait irrelevant, right? Because clickbait's all about manipulating SEO and search terms and people's attention. But if the AI is intelligently giving you the content that's truly good, that you would truly like, you can't game that anymore. So you'll have to actually create media and stories and content that actually is good and will connect with people. And I think that's a good thing. So look, it's going to be messy. And I think there's talk about a generation being one-shotted by AI, which is shorthand for just like they're going to be hooked on their devices, screens, and I fear that maybe a certain percentage of the population may fall prey to that. But we have to kind of let's be human. We need to be more human than ever right now, and talk about the issues, talk about the problems, and hopefully use this for good.
And look, it's been often said Andy Warhol was one of the most prescient people ever when he said, everyone in the future will be famous for 15 minutes. I mean, it talks to that in a kind of humorous and darkly humorous way, actually. But there's some version of that. And, look, the attrition is going to be quite intense, I think. But I think we can, I think we need to make the movies and the interactive narrative emergent story worlds that help guide this with the least attrition as possible. That's the platonic responsibility of being artists in the new mediums right now.
I agree. It's funny. I had someone explain it to me saying right now, a lot of us are riding horses and the Model T just got released. And it's time to get your driver's license because we're not going back to horses.
Definitely not.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of people think the Model T is released, but really there's a global transportation network that just launched, and people just haven't taken advantage of it yet. Because if you dive in and start using these tools, there's Sam Altman was just talking about this. There's a AI overhang of capabilities right now. So, anyways, the global transportation network is here.
And one of the things that I really like that you said there, Shannon, about how these small communities of supporting creators and sort of finding your people who and just finding voices that you never would have found otherwise. But when you talk about the positive and optimistic possibilities, we all need more community in our lives. We all need more connection in our lives.
Exactly.
And that ability to find the stories that speak to you and other people who are being spoken to by similar stories, that can only be to the good.
Story is the greatest technology humankind ever invented. I really believe that.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why, when we sit around a campfire and we don't have our phones there and we stare into it and what do we start doing? We tell stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you both so much for coming on. And I particularly, as you might imagine, on a number of these podcasts, people can go a bit down the P-Doom path of what's going to happen to the world and what's going to happen to creativity. I hope that the people who listen to this episode can feel the optimism and this really sort of utopic version of what story can become as we head into figuring out these tools. And it's going to take people like the two of you to just break some ground, take some chances, and stumble, break things, who knows, but find your way there, because we need people to take those chances so that we can all start creating the stories that are inside of us.
And we need to make those positive stories some hits, because it's a hits-driven business. So we got to do that. That's what'll make it happen, man.
%. All right. So thank you again. And I will put everybody's contact or where they can find you and your work in the show notes.
Fantastic.
And as I say to all of my guests, we should hop on here again in a year's time and see how much the world has changed as we're riding this exponential curve.
That'll be fantastic. All right.
Absolutely.
Great seeing you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Creative AI Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit creativeaipod.com.